picture the final, glittering years of the Russian Empire. The world is just teetering on the edge of war and revolution. But for the Romanov dynasty, the biggest threat wasn't on some battlefield. It was right there, inside the gilded halls of its own palace.
You see, the Alexander Palace was a world of its own, totally cut off from the political storms brewing outside. But behind those grand walls, Tsar Nicholas II and his wife Alexandra were hiding a truly devastating secret.
The entire future of a 300-year-old dynasty was resting on the shoulders of one small boy, the Tsarevich Alexei. And his life, well, it was hanging by a thread. He was threatened by a disease that could turn the smallest little bump or fall into a life-or-death crisis.
And into this world of private terror and immense public pressure walks this mysterious peasant mystic from Siberia, a man who offered them hope when it felt like all was lost. So the question is, was he their savior? Or was he just the final, most dramatic symptom of a dying empire?
To really get why the Romanovs would welcome such a controversial guy into their lives, you have to understand the incredible pressure they were under. This was a family that was completely, and I mean utterly, alone.
So first off, the 1905 revolution had shaken their hold on power right to its core. Then you have the Tsarina Alexandra. She was German-born, which made a lot of people suspicious. And on top of that, she had crippling social anxiety that people just mistook for arrogance. All this created this powerful us versus them mindset. They trusted basically no one in the gossipy St. Petersburg elite, and that left them isolated and pretty desperate for anyone they could truly trust.
And this was the source of their deepest, darkest fear: hemophilia, the royal disease. Every single moment of Alexei's childhood was filled with danger. A nosebleed, a simple bruise, any little thing could be fatal. This secret was a constant, living terror for his parents. And believe me, they would have done anything and trusted anyone who could ease their son's suffering.
And that's when a man named Grigori Rasputin enters the story. He's this wandering holy man, a peasant who looks totally disheveled but has this famously intense, penetrating gaze. He was probably the most unlikely person you could ever imagine stepping foot inside the imperial palace.
And here it is, this is the moment he officially enters their world, recorded in the Tsar's own diary. Now you have to remember, St. Petersburg society at the time was obsessed with mysticism, and Rasputin, with all his charisma and stories of spiritual journeys, he fit the bill perfectly. So at first he was just introduced to the royal couple as a kind of curiosity, a holy man.
But he became so much more than a curiosity in 1907. After a really bad fall, young Alexei was bleeding internally. The doctors were totally helpless. They could do nothing. So, in absolute desperation, Alexandra calls for Rasputin. He arrives, prays at the boy's bedside, and just calmly tells Alexandra not to worry, that the boy would live. And by the next morning, the bleeding had stopped, the fever was gone. For these terrified parents, it was nothing short of a miracle.
From that moment on, Rasputin wasn't just some holy man. He was indispensable. His place in the family's inner circle was cemented, not by any political games, but by their desperate love for their son.
So, how do we explain these miracles today? Well, while Alexander was convinced it was divine intervention, historians like Douglas Smith have some other really compelling explanations. For one, Rasputin's incredibly calm presence likely lowered the stress of both Alexandra and Alexei, and we know that can physically help a patient. He might have even used a form of hypnosis. And this is a huge one. He often told the doctors to stop giving Alexei aspirin, which we now know is a blood thinner, literally the worst thing you can give to a hemophiliac.
The relationship became so personal, almost like family. He didn't treat them with all this stiff formality of the court. To the Tsar and Tsarina, he was just our friend. The kids saw him as this fun, kind uncle who would play with them and tell them stories. He was this rare breath of fresh air in their stuffy, totally isolated world.
And this quote from the Tsar, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? Even Nicholas, who was way more skeptical, knew how valuable Rasputin was. Rasputin's main job, really, was to keep the Empress calm. Her peace of mind was so vital to the entire household that Nicholas was willing to put up with all the controversy just to keep it.
But here's the thing. While Rasputin was our friend inside the palace walls, the Russia outside those gates saw something very, very different. To them, he was a monster. The press and his political enemies, they painted this absolutely demonic picture of him. Rumors of his drunken parties and his sexual conquests spread like wildfire.
He was called a heretic, a charlatan, and as his influence grew, people saw him as the secret power behind the throne, the Dark One who was really pulling all the strings.
And when World War I started, the whole situation just became explosive. Rasputin was against the war, and of course the Tsarina was German-born. This created a completely catastrophic story. Rasputin, the German spy, was manipulating the German-born empress to destroy Russia from the inside. That rumor was absolutely devastating for the monarchy.
So the hatred for Rasputin reached a boiling point. A group of conservative nobles, who, ironically, thought they were trying to save the monarchy from him, decided they had to take matters into their own hands.
In December of 1916, they lured him to a palace, and in a brutal, now legendary assassination, they killed him. They really thought that by getting rid of this one man, they could restore faith in the Tsar and save Russia. They could not have been more wrong.
Because, you see, Rasputin had left behind a pretty chilling prophecy. He had written that if he were killed by commoners, the Tsar had nothing to fear. But if he were killed by nobles, by the Tsar's own relatives, then none of the imperial family would survive more than 2 years.
And just look at this timeline. The speed of the collapse is just staggering. Less than 3 months after Rasputin's murder, the revolution kicks off. A month after that, the Tsar is forced to abdicate. And by July 1918, less than 2 years later, just like he predicted, the entire Romanov family was executed by the Bolsheviks.
Which brings us right back to that big question. Was this one peasant mystic really powerful enough to bring down a 300-year-old dynasty? Or was the Romanov Empire already so sick, so isolated and out of touch that a guy like Rasputin was just the inevitable, final symptom of a collapse that was already happening?